our channel, become our patron. Visit patreon.com/Cycle Maintenance Academy.
Hi, Mary from Cycle Maintenance Academy here. Today we're going to look at adjusting limiter screws on your derailleur. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and like our video. Okay, let's start. Every front and rear derailleur will have two screws that control how far it moves at its limits. Without them, the derailleur wouldn't be able to stop when reaching the highest and lowest gear, pushing the chain off the cogs. On front mechs, the limit screws can be found at the top, and on rear derailleurs, they are usually placed either at the back or at the front. One of the screws, usually marked as H for high gear, stops the chain from falling off the biggest sprocket at the front and the smallest cog at the rear. The other, usually marked as L for low gear, stops the chain from falling off the smallest chainring at the front and the biggest cog at the rear. The end of the screw embedded in the derailleur body has either a crosshead screwdriver fitting or an Allen key fitting. When you may need to adjust the limit screws. When setting up a new bike. Sometimes a new bike may require further setup of the limit screws. When replacing the derailleur. The limit screws on a new derailleur are set up below the reach limits so they don't cause the chain to come off before the mech is adjusted. Symptoms of incorrect setup of limit screws. If the low limiter on either the front or the rear derailleur is screwed in too far, then the chain will not shift to the lowest gear. If the low limiter on either the front or the rear derailleur is not screwed in enough, then the chain will come off the lowest gear. If the high limiter on either the front or the rear derailleur is screwed in too far, then the chain will not shift to the highest gear. If the high limiter on either the front or the rear derailleur is not screwed in enough, then the chain will come off the highest gear. Be aware that if your limit screws were set up correctly and any of these symptoms occurred later in time, it is less likely that limiters need to be adjusted, and it is an indication of other gear problems. Setting up the rear derailleur limit screws. Put the bike on a stand. Move the derailleur to the highest gear at the back. Loosen the gear cable. Locate the high screw. If there is no marking to indicate which one is which, then to work this out, choose any of the limit screws and start turning it anti-clockwise. If it is the high gear limit screw, then the derailleur arm will move right towards the frame. If it doesn't move, then this is a low limit screw. To adjust the high limit screw, stand behind the bike and make sure that the smallest cog and the jockey wheels are in line. If the top jockey wheel is offset to the right, then turn the high limit screw clockwise, quarter of a turn at a time, until it lines up with the smallest sprocket. If the top jockey wheel is offset to the left, then turn the high limit screw anti-clockwise quarter of a turn at a time until it lines up with the smallest sprocket. To adjust the low limit screw, pedal the crank forward and manually push the derailleur to the largest cog. If the top jockey wheel is offset to the left, then turn the low limit screw clockwise quarter of a turn at a time until it lines up with the largest sprocket. If the top jockey wheel is offset to the right, then turn the low limit screw anti-clockwise quarter of a turn at a time until it lines up with the largest sprocket. Once you're happy with both limit screws, move the derailleur to the highest gear at the back, tighten the cable and check the gears. Setting up the front derailleur limit screws. To adjust the front limit screw, first move the chain onto the lowest gear. Move the rear derailleur to the lowest gear. Undo the front gear cable. Locate the low screw. If there is no marking to indicate which one is which, then to work this out, while looking from the top, choose any of the limit screws and turn it anti-clockwise. If it is the low limit screw, then the derailleur will move left towards the frame. If it doesn't move, then this is a high limit screw. If the gap between the chain and the back plate of the front derailleur is more than 2 to 3 millimeters, then turn the low limit screw clockwise, quarter of a turn at a time, until you achieve a 2 to 3 millimeter gap. If the chain is rubbing on the back plate of the front derailleur, then turn the low limit screw anti-clockwise, quarter of a turn at a time, until you have a 2 to 3 millimeter gap. Now shift the rear gears so that the chain moves to the highest gear. Tighten the front gear cable. Change the front gears to the largest chain ring. If the chain comes off, or the gap between the chain and the front plate of the derailleur is more than 2 to 3 millimeters, then turn the high limit screw clockwise, quarter of a turn at a time, until you achieve a 2 to 3 millimeter gap. If the chain is rubbing on the front plate of the derailleur, then turn the high limit screw anti-clockwise, quarter of a turn at a time, until you have a 2 to 3 millimeter gap. If the gap is changing while spinning the crank, then the chainring is bent, and replacing the crank will be the next step. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to make some comments in the box below about how you got on with adjusting your limiter screws.